What is your full name, sir?
My full name is Verne Sidel.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in 1918, March 3rd, 1918, in Lincoln, Nebraska.
So how old are you right now?
I am 99 years old right now.
Do you feel like you're 99?
Some days I do, yes.
What do you mean?
But most days I feel real good. I take care of myself. I do whatever I please usually. So I'm living very well right now by myself. Luckily I have close neighbors and good family.
So if you don't feel like you're 99, how old do you feel?
Well, I didn't say I didn't feel like 99, but my family keeps saying I'm going to be 100, and I don't know that I'm going to be 100. I'm enjoying 99 right now.
Okay.
But that's as far as I could go.
What branch of the service were you in during World War II?
I was in the Army.
And what were the specific units that you were a part of?
I was attached to the medical detachment of the infantry. This was go out with we walked with the infantry, went with the infantry, and set up our aid station, and then took care of any fellows that needed help with their medical.
What was your regiment and what was your division?
My regiment was the 168th Infantry, and my division was the 34th Division, and the 5th Army to add that to it too.
And what was your specific role in the first aid station?
My specific role as the first aid station was to record if we had a patient come in. We had to record everything that we were doing with him or her, and that was my job, was to record the status of his situation.
As a clerk?
As a clerk, so that the hospital, when we sent it to the hospital, they would know what to do, or what we had done or what we are going to do.
So what was the highest rank you achieved by the time you left the armed services?
7th. It was called this, not...
Tech 5? Tech Sergeant? Tech 5? 5th grade?
I was corporal, 7th grade. That apparently went with the job that I had to do. I don't know.
So you were born in Lincoln, Nebraska. Did you grow up there as well?
Do I what?
Did you grow up in Nebraska?
Well, till about 10 years old.
And then what?
That was during the Depression, and my father was transferred to Waterloo, Iowa. So naturally I went along, and I was about 10 years old at the time.
When you were growing up in Nebraska as a small child, what kind of things would you do for fun?
Oh, golly, roller skating was my main fun. And I call it fun because I did learn to play the piano pretty well, and every week I would go on my roller skates to go practice my piano playing. That was my most fun, I believe. Outside of bicycle riding, I enjoyed that very much too.
What was your father's profession?
My father was a manager of the National Biscuit Company in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Was he a World War I veteran?
No, he was not. His brother was, but he was not.
Did your uncle talk to you about the war?
No, I don't believe so.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I do have a brother and had a brother and a sister. Both have passed away since.
Did your brother serve?
Yes, he did.
What branch?
The Army.
Did he see combat?
I beg pardon?
Did he see combat? Did he get into combat?
Oh, yes. He was in the Alaska, Australia area, New Zealand. He was in New Zealand.
So, talk to me about the struggles that your family faced during the Great Depression.
Well, that's kind of a tough thing for a young kid to say, but the primary thing was food. We had plenty of food. So for my uncle or my grandpa that I lived with had a bakery, and so we had plenty of food. But it's hard to describe. But the main thing, of course, at my age was my father having to move from one area to another area to hold his position. So that was very kind of discouraging, but that's just the way things were those days.
What were the first few jobs you had growing up?
I didn't have a first job growing up. Well, I should say I should. I worked at a filling station when I first grew up. That was my first job after high school, I believe, or maybe during high school. But I worked at the Wrath. Probably don't remember, you probably wouldn't remember that, but the Wrath Packing Company in Waterloo, one of the largest packers in the world at one time. I worked there for 40 years, and then I went into service from there.
What high school did you go to, and what year did you graduate?
I went to Waterloo West High School, and I graduated in 1936.
What did you want to do with your life before the war?
Well, I don't think I had a decision made by that time. I don't believe. I can't tell you. I worked at the Wrath Packing Company as in the advertising department. I worked there for 40 years, so I was very happy with that job. When I went into service, I had to leave, of course, and then they hired me back when I came back, and so I worked there the rest of my working lifetime. So.
And describe to me how you heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Well, I was in service already at Pearl Harbor.
Oh, okay. So before we get into Pearl Harbor, how did you end up in the service?
I was drafted. That's about all I can tell you. I was drafted in May of 1941, and that's where my Army career started. I went from Waterloo to Des Moines. I went from Des Moines to St. Louis. I went from St. Louis to Louisiana to do my training, and then from there we went over after Pearl Harbor. Okay. Oh.
You were saying you were going from St. Louis.
I went to St. Louis to register to where I was going to be assigned when I went into service, and that led me from there to Louisiana, where we stayed and did our physical training, and we were at Louisiana camp at the time of Pearl Harbor. And immediately after Pearl Harbor had happened, we were prepared to go overseas, which we did.
How did you hear about the attack? Where were you
I'm sure I was in Louisiana, and I think the only way that we heard about it was as everybody else had with either TV or the newspaper or whatever. But that's, as far as I remember, that's how we heard about it.
what were your thoughts when you heard about the attack?
Well, it gives you some second thoughts about going overseas, that's for sure. And so, but uh, that led us to think that, well, now it's our turn to do something for the United States. So we were kind of prepared to go to overseas, and we left Louisiana and went to Camp Dix in New Jersey right away, almost the next day. And from there, we had to wait for a boat to take us overseas, and so eventually we got a boat at New York, and went overseas at that time.
So where did you guys go from New York?
Beg pardon?
Where did you guys go from New York?
From New York, we had a heck of a tough ocean voyage, I'll tell you that, for one thing. Going over the North Atlantic in the wintertime is no fun, but it...
What do you mean? Elaborate on that, please.
Well, this was our own physical condition. It was this was not any service thing at all, but so many of the guys got sick going overseas. It was such a rough sea, and we all had to battle getting sick, and so that made the voyage, of course, a lot more unpleasant than it might have been. But there were plenty of German E-boats out there looking for us, of course, but we made it overseas, and we went to Ireland, in England. We landed at Dublin, Ireland, and stayed there for, I suppose, 6 months of additional training period.
It takes me through the kind of things that you had to learn in order to do your job.
Well, it's my particular job within the organization was writing down on what we were doing for a patient. If we had a patient come in, I had to write down what we were doing for him, what his problems were, what they should do for him in the hospital after he was put in the hospital and taken to the hospital. That was my job. I was not a medic to speak of. I was more of a clerk than a medic.
So, did you have to learn medical training, though?
Well, you said, yeah, some of them.
Okay, I was asking the kind of training that you had to undergo.
What kind of training? I really didn't have to do a lot of training. I was pretty well, I think, in that probably one case that the Army may have placed me in a kind of almost a right position, because I did a lot of clerk type of work when I was at the Rath Packing Company where I worked, and so I just kind of transferred that into the Army, writing down what this person or that person, what they should do when they get him to the hospital, and things like that. So anything of interest for the veteran, the soldier that had been injured.
So, now tell me, how did you find out that you would be going to North Africa?
Well, that's pretty tough. Any place in the Army, if you're going anywhere, it's pretty tough to find out where you're going. We went, of course, from the United States. We went to uh, uh, Ireland, and there we trained for, I suppose we trained for, if I got there about March, I guess we trained till about November, I would think. In November, we were put on a convoy of boats. One convoy was coming from the United States, and the second convoy was coming from England. We were on the one, of course, from England, and we headed out for somewhere. We didn't have any idea where we were going, but it turned out that we were going to be on an invasion of Africa, and that's the way it happened. We on this convoy, and the convoy joined forces at the Rock of Gibraltar, and then went into the Mediterranean. Certain boats dropping certain people off. General Patton was let out, I think, somewhere around Monaco or something like that. We went all the way to the end, which was the end base was Algeria, and we were let out at Algeria and did our job there of getting rid of some of the uprisings that they were having down there. There were it's surprising how many soldiers, and French soldiers, as a matter of fact. It seemed strange to have French as enemies and French as on your side. But there were a lot of unhappy French people down in Africa, and General the German general, who was primarily a tank man, was driving his forces toward where we were, stationed, and our job there, of course, not the medical part, but the other part was to stop his entry out into the desert. And that was our job at that time, was to do that. And as it turned out, I could tell a little more if you want, whatever you want me to, but that was not the end of it for us, of course. But
yeah, tell me more.
Well, it's one of those things. We were stationed on a high part of the tell me where we were. Fayette Pass or Kasserine Pass.
Wait,
we were.
What's the difference?
Well, there was some little mileage difference. We were at Kasserine Pass, and they one day everything seemed to go to what's his name, Rommel. The Desert Fox, it was called. Rommel, the German general, was there with his tanks, and we had our tanks there, which were very inferior to their tanks. So we had quite a few injuries at that time. So one day, there wasn't any communication anymore, and they dropped information that we should get out of that area as quickly as we can, and we were supposed to destroy, and we didn't have any arms, but they had to destroy all their arms, and we were going to walk about 30 miles to reach a station where there were trucks waiting for us to take us back to our campsite. So anyway, that night we started out and it worked out very well. We did a great job of walking, I should say. And then all of a sudden, at dawn, we met some other soldiers, and pretty soon you could hear boom, boom, boom. They were sending shells over us, and we said, "What the heck is going on here?" So all the trucks on the road were there, waiting to pick us up. Well, here it turns out to be that all these soldiers that were firing at us and all their trucks on the road were all German trucks. So, and we of course had destroyed all our weapons and so on, so there was no way to retaliate. And so that was the start of my prison life in Germany. If you want me to continue on, why they took us then from that site to a little town of City-Buzin, and we were gathered with others. We kind of thought I think we were a group of about 50 maybe GIs that were walking this distance and beating the trucks. And when we got over to City-Buzin,
Continue.
Oh, okay. We got to a little town of City-Buzin, and we found that there were many, many hundreds of American GIs already captured. So there we were, all captured, and what to do now. So the Germans again kind of liked to walk in those days, I guess. They thought we had to walk another 30 miles, and we were going to the airport at Tunisia. And we didn't know it was an airport at the time. We went to the airport of Tunisia, and there we were loaded onto German planes. They were tankers, of course, so not passenger planes, but just old tankers, and could smell the high of gasoline. But anyway, we left there and flew to Naples, Italy. And at Naples, Italy, it was kind of a different story. From there we were to either take truck to go somewhere or a train to go somewhere. The trains were nothing but boxcars, and they were like the old World War II days when they had a rail car for, as I remember, 40 men or 20 horses. So we were put in these boxcars, and this is the way we traveled up through Rome, and sometimes by truck, went through the Alps, and went to Naples, Italy, or Naples, Germany, and there we stayed for about a month, where we were given a letter that we could write home. My parents at home had said they came and delivered messages that I was a prisoner, or I was not a prisoner, but captured out of the field. But then later on, they sent a message that I was a prisoner of war, a prisoner. So we were able to write a letter to our family at home at that time, and that's when they learned from the Army too that I was a prisoner of war at that time. So anyway, from from Munich, then Germany. They put us on trains again, the same old kind of trains where we couldn't stand up and pee even. It was really tough riding. So we went to a little town called Furstenberg on the Oder Canal, and that's where the prison camp was. It was about 50 kilometers from Berlin, and that's where we were a prisoner for 2 years. So.
Talk to me about life as a POW.
Well, life as a POW we had good days and bad days.
Start with the bad days.
Bad days were those when somebody would try to escape, and we would, no matter what kind of weather it was, they would put us all outside and let us stand there until they would always. I don't think there's anybody escaped from there, but they always would catch somebody, and we stayed there until they were captured, no matter what kind of weather. The food was not bad, but soup most every. Start out with breakfast, because breakfast was nothing but a pot of coffee, what we would call coffee. They made it out of some kind of tree bark and so on. But at I think 9 times out of 10, the guys would use that brew for shaving, because we had no hot water. We never had hot water. We never had any heat in the buildings. That was part of if there was any suffering, it would have been the cold, not only cold bathing, cold weather, no fire, any furnace of any kind. So we generally used that breakfast coffee do our shaving and washing our face with a little bit, because at least it was warm. And usually the noon meal was always was soup, not any baby about it. It was always soup of some kind, and there were many kinds of soup in the German language, evidently. But we had rutabaga soup, we had pea soup, we had fish soup, we had whatever you might want to think of as soup. And sometimes it was quite edible, and sometimes it was very bad. Especially we always made comment about here we were going to have pea soup that day, and the pea soup was nothing but almost full of bugs of some sort.
Bugs.
But excuse me.
There would be bugs in your soup?
Yes, bugs in your soup. You had to kind of sort it out before you could eat it.
What would you do with the bugs?
I'll throw them on the floor, I guess. I don't remember. I just don't remember that. Sorry. Usually the supper was a couple of slices of bread and a couple of slices of meat, and that was it. So the food was very few. The food itself was very little of it, and we all, like you see in some of the pictures and so on, that we lost a lot of weight. I'm sure that I lost at least probably 50 pounds or so, but then after a while, the German people soldiers let the the YMCA come in, and they brought in some packages of food. There were two GI soldiers on one package of food that the Y brought in, and that usually contained something that was edible and so on. So that's kind of how we once we got those packages started coming in, why on a regular basis, why it became a little more easy to at least to get food. That doesn't make it any easier in the camp itself, but anyway, we
Did the guards ever beat you guys?
the guards. I'll tell you, we had on the corner of each. I don't know whether you call it barracks. There's at least a guard or two in a station up above and watching over the whole place. And the worst thing that I ever saw was GIs fighting over cigarettes. I'm glad I didn't smoke at the time. I never have smoked at the time, but the GI would happen to have a cigarette and flip it over here or there, and then there was a fight for the stub so that the next guy could have a puff or two on it. That was very, very discouraging to find that happened. But that's the way it was. And and the guards, of course, they had around the whole barracks or whole camp. There were about 10 feet of space between the outside fence and the inside, and guys would flick their cigarettes into this 10 foot area, and they all run in and try to get the cigarette. And of course, then that's when the Germans came into play with their guns. They didn't. I don't think they tried to kill anybody at the time, but they did use their guns to chase, get out of there and not mess with the cigarettes. So
At the camp that you were at, were people actively trying to make tunnels out of the camp?
No, I tell you what, they did not. We had to dig when the Americans started getting closer and closer to our camp, and we had to dig our own air raid shelter and so on. But yeah, as you might know, there were some American GIs that had the knowledge of making things or doing things, and unbelievable that they were able to make radios that were able to pick up some of the German information, what was going on outside, because you never got it from any of the German soldiers or anything. But in order to keep these radios operating, why the GIs had we had a three stall bed, three high, and under the last one they were digging holes so that they could make these radio things down in there. And luckily we were able to get some information from outside by these radios that the GIs had made. It's surprising how wonderful that is. And the only other thing that is maybe not important or important is that they like Germans, of course. We all knew that they like dogs, and they had as I say, we had a three-stall bed arrangement, and these dogs could get up on that third bed pretty easily. So we were all after a while at least, we got pretty used to having the dogs come and chase us out of bed if you didn't get out of bed when the time for roll call was there. You better get out, or the dogs were after you. So they used dogs in a lot of areas at that time. So
Did you guys ever get to take a bath?
no, never.
Not even.
They cut all our hair off, so we looked like skeletons, so to speak. But the bath, we'd try to wash our face and so on like that. But they never provided. Not only even worse than the cold water was that they did not have any modern toilets. These are all like what you might see at a farm out here in Iowa, outside farm toilet
Outhouse.
in a larger building, of course, but there probably were 10 or 15 or 20 toilets in a room, but they were just toilets that were man-made, so to speak. They didn't have anything modern whatsoever. So that's as far as the toilet is concerned, we had to use those toilets. I do have a little story to tell, which is a little different from quite a few of the other GIs. There were, I don't know how many GIs were in this camp. I suppose at least 2,500, 5,000, I don't know. But anyway, one day they came into the camp and said, we're all going to have a prisoner exchange. And fortunately or unfortunately, I guess, I was chosen as one of the guys to be exchanged for German prisoners. And this became quite a ordeal, but when the time came for me to, they put us on a train, and with a couple guards, we had to get out 2 or 3 or half a dozen times a day, because now, of course, the Americans were getting closer and closer. They were bombing all around the area, so whenever a train came to a train yard or something, and there might have been a bombing or something going on somewhere close by, why we had to get out and go in the trenches to protect ourselves. Then we get back in and go for a little, maybe it's another 25 miles or 50 miles or 100 miles, whatever. But anyway, we didn't have any idea where we were going, but we were supposed to be exchanged somehow or other. And finally, we kept going. Finally, surprisingly, we came to Switzerland, and we were the guys that were chosen to be exchanged were turned over to the Swiss people. And so the Swiss took us, and the Swiss kind of took us out faster than the Germans. Apparently they didn't want anything much because they were neutral. They didn't really want anything to do with the American soldiers. So they put us on a train, and we went to wherever the French border with Switzerland was. So that's where they dropped us off, and we stayed there until there was transportation to go home, and that was the end then of my prison life. Got a boat home. It was happened to be a hospital boat, but they took us home. We landed at one of the Carolinas and got transported home, and that's where was released then.
The prisoner exchange was successful then?
Beg pardon?
The prisoner exchange was successful?
Well, yeah, I think it was successful. I don't know how many total prisoners there were involved. It didn't seem like there were that many to make much difference at all. But anyway, and I don't know why I was picked, unless it was because I was a medical man, so to speak. And So as far
how
as,
long before the war was over did you get back home?
well, before the war was over, we got back home. Let's see, it would have been in 1945, probably. I think we got home around March of 1945, and I don't know when I can't now remember when the war ended, but somewhere in the middle of 1945, I think. So we probably, I tell you, I did talk to quite a few of those GIs that were left behind when I was left. They had to, the German problem was to try to keep the whatever they were, whatever was important to them, I guess, try to keep the American prisoners away from the Russians. The Russians were coming from the one way, and the American soldiers were coming from the other way. So they marched everybody out of that camp and marched them, of course, toward the American side because they wanted to give the American prisoners a chance to be turned over to the American soldiers. So that's what they did, and I understand they had a very, very hard time making these marches because the Germans were running out of food. They were in very, very bad shape, I would say, especially those GIs that had to walk 30, 40, 50 miles to get to the American lines. So eventually the Americans took them over, but
No.
they had to go through quite a bit in order to get there.
But before we wrap up, can you tell me more about North Africa? Now, if you were working in an aid station, what kind of wounds would the GIs have when they would come to you?
Well, they were, well, I don't know what you would call them. I guess you say there were, of course, gun wounds. They were, some of them were very extremely hurt very badly.
What do you mean
with
by that?
guns? I think, of course, Germany wasn't there just with their tanks. They were there also with foot soldiers, and so they got involved with the exchange of gunfire, I guess, and some of them were very, very bad shape. And I'll tell you what, when we left, we had the soldiers all tagged and everything, waiting for an ambulance or something to come and pick them up. Well, that wasn't going to happen because the way it was now, they told everybody to get out of this area as best they can. So these poor guys that were wounded had to be left. They were just left there, and we of course tagged them with everything that we knew what was the matter with them and what they needed to be done with them, and so that when the Germans took over, we hoped that they would take them to a hospital and help them recover. Now, whether that ever happened or not, I've never heard that they were recovered and taken back taken to a German hospital at all. So I don't know. But anyway, that's the way we left them. They had to stay there, and there was no way we could carry them out. So that's the way it went.
But what do you remember about the terrain in North Africa?
The terrain? Well, the terrain that we were in was on a high I don't know what I want to call it, high as a mountaintop, but they were, what we were fighting at the pass was trying to kind of keep what's his name, the German general, keep his tanks out of the desert. Once he got in the desert, he was free to kind of roam all over wherever he wanted to. So we were in this high area to police the lower area down below where all the tanks were, and keep them from getting through from our area out into the desert. So apparently that program, watered by the information that we got, that get out of there the best you can, get away from there, because that was not a good place to be. Why, it had to be something that was happening in favor of the Germans, because they wanted us out of there because the Germans were going to take over. Unfortunately, the few of us that weren't able to get out, quite a few weren't able to get out. They were taken over by the Germans and became prisoners.
But Kasserine Pass, was that your first time under enemy fire?
Oh, yes.
Or that was your first time?
Oh, yes. Well, there wasn't much enemy fire as far as the Americans were concerned in the German theater. In fact, there was a lot of fighting going on between England and France and so on, the Germans, but not the Americans yet. So they were. I think we always figured that this is what the Americans were doing, were trading us and putting us into action to see how we could handle ourselves in battle. That's what we all thought anyway. So we when we got off at we happened to, our batch of guys got off at Algeria, and we got off as though there were battle going on the land, because we took boats off of the ship and so on, and then but it was not too difficult to take over the area that was being policed at that time by, well, I think by the French and the Germans. And Germans flew over our place of where we lived almost every night. And it's surprising, one of the, not a funny part, but I guess it was a funny part, but this town of Algiers had a huge post office building, and it was all beautiful, nice, like it would be in a desert area like that, I guess. Beautiful white building. But the first night we were there, that building became a dark green color. They painted it overnight. They painted it so the Air Force couldn't use that as a guide to find different places. So there are a lot of strange things going on. But
now I want to know though, you didn't have any experiences with the German Stuka dive bombers before Kasserine?
No, we didn't.
And explain to me though. Tell me the story again, how you got captured, because I'm kind of confused about it.
Oh, well, okay. We were doing our daily thing.
Which is what?
Which was going out in the battlefield, bringing soldiers in that needed medication of some sort.
But you wouldn't go into the battlefield. You were at.
I was at the aid station.
Got it. And is it like a tent aid station?
A tent, yeah. And my job was to make notes or write. Here comes a guy off. They're just bringing him in off the field.
And who do you give those notes to?
I assume they had somebody. I can't remember now, but the doctors were giving instructions: do this, do this, do this, do this. Then all of a sudden, everything seemed to be okay, but all of a sudden we get a message. Now it's strange, and I don't understand this message because we had planes, American planes, even coming over the battlefield all the time. It seemed like all the time, but all of a sudden they drop messages from the airplanes, says, "Get out of this position the best way you can." And so that's what we did. That night, we walked to a place that they said was about 30 miles from our campsite.
So you said you had to walk how many miles?
So they said we're going to have to walk about 30 miles. The main highway is about 30 miles from here, and on that highway will be trucks to pick you guys up. So here we go. And we did a good job. They did a good job of leading us out in the night time to our destination, because we got to when daylight came. Here on the main road we could see a lineup of trucks. Oh golly, we thought, well, that's great. The trucks are there to pick us up, okay, because we'd already walked 30 miles. And
you're being guided by the planes?
No, not guided by anybody, but whoever was in charge.
Is it just the first aid personnel, or do you have regular
No.
riflemen?
This is all regular personnel. The military or the medical personnel were a very small, minor part of it. I don't know how. I really don't know how many were within our range, but I suppose.
But during this time, are you guys being shelled by the German artillery?
Oh yeah, sure.
Describe to me what that's like.
Huh?
What is that like to have shells going off around you?
Well, there were German tanks all over the place. This was their big thing down there. Was the general was General whatever would I say his name was. He's the premier general of Germany, and they were all over the place. But our tanks have as far as I'm concerned, were no comparison to what the Germans had at that time. The Americans changed very rapidly because they had good home construction. But so
back to the story. So you see the trucks.
Oh yes, very definitely.
And then what happens when you see the trucks?
What?
What happens when you see the trucks?
When we see the truck is when we started getting shells from all the German army. The German army started dropping some mortar shells over this group of guys that was coming, American guys, and it didn't seem like they were trying to hit us or anything like that. It just didn't seem like it, because they certainly had a chance to bomb this group of guys. But anyway, so when we first came able to see the trucks, well, the German guys, soldiers, were there at the same time. So when we saw that these couldn't be German trucks, or couldn't be American trucks, with German soldiers throwing shells at us. So we knew something was wrong right there, because all the trucks turned out to be German trucks instead of American trucks. And then they took us to this little town of City Bouzed, and there were thousands more Americans already captured at that time. So,
is this at day or night?
This was daytime now when we went to this little town.
Got it. And how
We had already walked the whole night through, and this was the daytime.
when you guys got captured by the Germans, how did the civilians treat you as they were marching you in the town?
There weren't no civilians, but
Or how'd the Germans treat you then?
well, first of all, they wouldn't give us anything to eat. We had gone all night long without anything to eat, and I don't think. I think they gave us a piece of hard bread of some sort, and that's what we first. Well, it was very difficult to. So now what do we do? Here we are, prisoners. What does that do for us? You know what are we?
Oh.
So anyway, they when we got to this little town and dumped us all together, why the Germans then they were in charge and said we're going to have to walk another 30 miles to the airport in Tunisia to get you over to Germany. So that's the way it went.
What is some life advice you want to leave to future generations?
Stay out of what you're doing today. With all these bombings going on, these I don't know what I'm no expert about that sort of thing, but
if you were to give me some wisdom for my life, what would you tell me?
well, it's pretty difficult to say what you would tell a person that you would want to fighting like we were fighting is not the way to do it. There's got to be a better way to handle things, and I think we got to do a better job of dealing with other countries. And I think one of the saddest things, it's part of it'd be German, but it were the transportation for one thing that we had to do to get out of where we were in Africa. After we got into the mainland, we got these. I could just see it so well in my mind. These boxcars that were full of men. There wasn't room in the boxcar to sit down, let alone sit out a pee or poop or whatever might be. But it's what some of the GIs had to go through was very very disgusting, just disappointing. That would be my guess.
Where would you guys go to the bathroom in the boxcar?
The boxcar.
Really?
Sure. That they're not going to stop for you to go to the bathroom. So you just go in the corner and pee.
How would you entertain yourself in the POW camp? What would you do to pass the time?
Well, here again, at first I'd say there just wasn't anything to do except for walking. There was a lot of camp area. You could walk. You just hope that they did. We had in the camp there were other areas where soldiers were kept. Yeah, one next to us was a lot of Russian, not Russian, but maybe about, well, I don't know, maybe I could still call them Russian soldiers were there. But they treated them so much differently than they did Americans.
How'd they treat the Russians?
They made them walk on their hands and knees for long distances and stuff just to wear them down. It looked so bad, I don't know, but what we had to do was we had to, I guess, kind of make your own entertainment. Walking was main thing, and then as I mentioned before, after the YMCA kind of came in, the Germans let the YMCA come in with parcels and so on. Then they brought in some sports equipment, and they had softball games and stuff like that. The Germans let us do those sort of things, but so we basically, they furnished some of the equipment, but we had to do our own.
What do you want?
They didn't provide any of their own. They did provide some church services and stuff like that, but otherwise.
Would people die from malnutrition?
No, I don't. I don't know of anybody that died of the no, and I don't know of anybody that ever escaped either.
So
a lot of them tried to escape, but.
What do you want to say to all the men who died overseas in World War II?
Well, very difficult to say, I guess. Do you? I don't know what to say. To do your job, you got to do what they tell you to do. You got to do that. But that's about all I can say is do what they tell you to do, and hope for the best. That's all.
How do you want to be remembered?
Oh, just as someone that I guess did my job. I went to service as I was told by the government to do. I did my job, I think, as well as anybody could have done, I guess. And
do you have any last words?
Well, I just think if you're going to be a military person, you want to do as they tell you to do. You can't just do what you think ought to be done. So.
Well, thank you for your time and thank you for your service.
All right.